As you know, this is day 12 of the demonstrations that have been going on. Roughly 30 or so protests total so far. Quite a few injuries to our officers, about 19, ranging from explosives that have injured the eyes of our officers and caused burns and cuts to concussions. Kind of runs a gamut. I have one officer who's fractured an ankle, so it's been some tense times here. Also, we've had to arrest over 128 people so far, 23 of which for weapons. So there's a lot going on. I just want to talk specifically about the reason we're here today, which is about the civil emergency update. We have policy and protocol, the way we do business here. It kind of drives what we do. And since Tuesday, the 2nd of that incident, we've been discussing and improving how we do business. I'll tell you what I'm proud of is, and I keep saying it, and I'm going to say it even if I'm the only one saying it, I'm proud of our organization because we're a learning organization. We want to improve. We know we're not perfect, although we always aspire to be. We have humans working here and humans make mistakes. So as for Tuesday, we've all seen the video. It's not an easy video to watch. However, there's a lot of perspectives to it. That's why we're doing investigations. First and foremost, I requested the State Bureau of Investigations, as you know, to review this incident to make sure it is legal from our perspective. We haven't violated any laws. Also, the Office of Domestic Preparedness, we want to have them review our tactics independently because they're the experts. And then internally, there's an internal investigation. Everybody wants to know who made the call and who allowed for the chemical munitions to be used there. You are looking at him. I am the only one who can authorize chemical munitions. I give the blanket approval for that use, and then we specify within our policy and protocol what that looks like. That is the protocol that we're updating. The reason we're updating is we see a couple of areas that we can improve. Because right now, when we say a protest has become a riot, we continue to disperse until everybody's gone. What we see is back when it was static, meaning you had a crowd on one side and there's a police line and we're on the opposite side, we would disperse and just push the crowd and basically it will be over. Now people are more mobile. They will disperse and then come back together in other areas. So it's a gap in our policy that our command staff from the Civil Emergency Unit has shored up for us. I'm telling you today because we've codified that into a policy that will be available to you to see. And again, the standard operation protocol itself holistically is not open to public purview because it's methods and means. It's specific tactics that we use that we can't put out in the public sphere. But what we are going to show you is these enhancements that are written because it directs and controls how we engage with protesters moving forward. So I think it's worth you seeing so you can read it for yourself. Very explicit direction for our people and for the public to really understand where we're coming from. As I said, the order to disperse is given. People come back together as they did on Tuesday. And then our goal is to start over. There's a reset. We want to give people, again, the opportunity to disperse, to lawfully abide by the dispersal order. And then we have the opportunity to re-engage to gain cooperation. So we got quite a few things that we're looking at to make sure that that is clear. And you'll be getting the verbiage that helps us there. The other thing that we're doing along those lines is making sure that our commanders on the ground are very clear and precise in explaining to protesters the avenue that they can take to get away so that they can disperse without having to be exposed to any chemical munitions in the future. We want to make sure we're abundantly clear about the potential escape routes prior to deployment. That is another enhancement. Lastly, though, I just want to make sure everybody understands why we deploy chemical munitions in the first place, because there's a lot of conversation and I think, quite frankly, confusion. The intent is not to punish or abuse. The intent is to gain cooperation and have people leave an area that has become riotous. It is not a tool that we use very quickly. It is not something that we use without forethought. The approval process has to go up the rank structure unless it is an immediate threat to the safety of our officers or other people or property right now. That's the only time that the commander on the ground can make the decision to deploy. So these are enhancements that we wanted you to be aware of and wanted to further discuss with you before we entertain any questions that you may have. So at this point, this is your time to ask me any questions about whatever's on your mind so we can respond.
Amanda Zoe, sir.
Hi, this is Amanda. I was wondering, following Monday's City Council meeting, will CMPD still outfit the CEU with chemical munitions? And how much more chemical munitions would you say you have left following that meeting?
Okay, I'm trying to understand your question. I think you're breaking up a bit. You're asking me how many chemical munitions do we have in stock? Is that your question?
And whether the CEU will still be outfitted with chemical munitions?
Yes, we still have that at our disposal. We're just not allowed to purchase any in FY21. What's interesting about that is we had no request for the purchase of it in FY21. So this is the opportunity for us to step back and reassess as we're doing. I told you we have the investigations going on and the review going on, but ultimately council felt that there was a need to act and not allow for the purchase in FY21, and that's where we are. As far as how much we have on hand, I don't get into methods and means that would sacrifice safety. So we have a sufficient supply to do the job that we need to do if necessary. And again, for 12 days, we had one bad day. So I think we're going to be okay.
Joe Bruno, Illinois.
Hey, Chief, it's Joe Bruno. Do you have any plans to purchase chemical agents between now and July 1st when fiscal year 21 starts?
Well, the Republican National Convention is still coming in some form or fashion, and there might be a need for them then. And if that is the case, we will make that purchase through that grant.
Brett Jensen, WBT Radio.
Yes, Chief. I'm curious, as a minority, Braxton Winston last night called CMPD racist, homophobic, and sexist. What are your personal thoughts about that?
I'm not going to talk about the personal. Listen, I respect the brother. I want what's best for him, but I want him to be a bit more knowledgeable and a bit more thoughtful in his comments. We're right now investigating one incident that I really wish had never happened, to be honest with you. I don't like seeing that kind of thing. And we're paying a price for that. There's an investigation for that. We're going to let that investigation run its course. But name calling and labeling everybody with a broad brush is exactly why we do Bridge the Difference. We want to show what we have in common instead of being divisive and vindictive. Name calling to me is childish. I'm not going to stoop down to that level because I'm a professional. But I will say I get the essence of the message about wanting us to be better as an organization and a profession, which is why we're making the improvements. So at least we have that in common. But personally, I don't talk about it. I just remain the professional that I am and do my job because there are too many people watching. If this is a back and forth between two black leaders in this city, it does nobody good, and I'm not going to speak to that one.
Brianna Harper.
Chief, with the discovery of the pig's heads that were found on I-277, there was also a similar incident outside the LAPD precinct. Is there any reason to believe that that is a serious or credible threat towards the police, and anything you guys are doing to kind of extra protect the officers that are out and about?
You're talking about the pig heads that have been left out?
Yes, sir.
Yes. More symbolic than anything, I would imagine. Unfortunately, though, we have had a lot of personal threats to our officers and their families, and we're taking those very seriously and taking proper precautions. Again, that's the struggle that we have. We have a lot of good people who are being put in bad positions, and I think it's just unconscionable that you would threaten their families. That's hard to understand, but we're going to take every precaution we can to keep all of our CMPD families safe, just like we do for every other family in our jurisdiction.
Drew Valera, WCCB. Good.
Sorry.
Drew, are you with us? Go ahead, sir.
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, it was very glitchy on my end. I apologize. Chief, do you have any regrets for how things played out from last Tuesday? You said you've had 12 days and one bad day. So do you have any regrets for how things played out last Tuesday?
Obviously, I hate any time our people are perceived or even put themselves in a position where criticism is absolutely justified. We can do better. That's why I'm talking to you today. We will do better. Do I regret that happened? Absolutely. Further, though, I regret that we're put in a position where we have to deploy chemical munitions. There's an easy solution. When we say disperse, this is unlawful, people need to go home. And I don't mean to be callous. I just want to be serious about that. I don't want anyone injured. I don't want to deploy chemical munitions, and I don't want a reason to have to do so. In 11 of those days, for the most part, we've been fortunate not to have to. We've had 10,000 or so people in one protest with not an issue, not even a negative look from our officers towards the protesters, because we know the First Amendment is key to the freedoms that we want to have as a country. We take those seriously, which is why we had a captain who's walked over 100 miles trying to facilitate the exercise of that First Amendment. We are all in this together, whether we like it or not. We can have differences of opinion, but there's a way to express it. And that is not through violence and destruction.
Eric Spanberg.
Hi, Chief. I'm curious, you mentioned the RNC earlier. I'm wondering, at what point do you have to make multiple scenarios or create multiple scenarios for security based on whether the president speaks here or the size and scope of the convention once that is settled?
I don't know that we have a specific deadline yet. We're preparing, obviously, based on the newer information that is business. So what the scale and scope still is yet to be determined. And it would be unfolding, because a lot of those things we can't predict. We just have to prepare for. But we know now that the acceptance won't be here, but the business will, and we're preparing accordingly. We can't anticipate, the scale and scope yet. We're waiting for the RNC to give us more details as we move forward. Don't have a timeline, unfortunately. But like everything else in my life, I'm used to being on hold. And this is one of those things we all are on hold.
Derek Dillinger.
Yeah, this is Derek Dellinger with Fox 46. The question real quick in regards to the patrolling over the past 12 days or so. We know last week there was a lot of disorganization. Disorganization led to some incidents that were happening of a rather volatile nature, including what happened on Tuesday. On Thursday, we started noticing some more organization. Things were peaceful. Things suddenly became a whole lot more peaceful after about Thursday or so. Has this gotten easier in terms of the patrolling aspect for CMPD, or is it still kind of a rough situation? Because there have been some circumstances where some have tried to get away, get onto 277, various other circumstances. But overall, has it been easier for the officers over the last several nights, or is it something that's still a very fluid situation? You guys have to be aware of it.
All right. So as far as the disorganization, we have a plan, and we've been executing that plan. I've given you some clarity in improvements we're making along protocol lines. The disorganization is what we've been responding to. When it becomes assaultive or destructive, we have to use other tactics. So our tactics and strategy have remained the same as far as our philosophy of approach to protecting the First Amendment rights. We did have, again, the Tuesday incident where there was a riot that we had to address. and we can be tactically better at doing that, which is why we're talking about these policy enhancements that our people have put together. As far as basically being able to be in a position where we relax and think that things are calm, no, we're not there. Our officers are still working 12-hour shifts. We're still not seeing enough of our families, but hey, really, right now what we believe is the First Amendment is this important. It's this important for the city to get their message out. And here's the other thing. It's important that everybody in the city hears it, but I want it to be heard in a way that people aren't overreacting violently and destructively. So I'm proud of the city. Overall, the protesters are doing it in a way that their message can be received and digested, not just heard. Just because you're screaming doesn't mean people are going to really listen. But now there's some listening going on and some movement going on that I think is going to pay dividends for showing the world what kind of city we are as here in Charlotte.
Rhea Bell.
Hi, Chief. This is Bria Bell with WBTV. Has there been a need to discipline any officers in any capacity throughout the protest?
This investigation that's ongoing is yet to be determined, but we haven't had a lot of violations of our policy. Tuesday aside, I think we're performing very well as a civil emergency unit. I'm proud of them. There's some very good professionals who are paying a high price, and they're doing so quite well. Again, as humans, we're not perfect, but overall, that Tuesday incident is the major incident that deserves a lot of scrutiny. And if we determine that issues that rise to the level of policy violations, we're going to hold people accountable, including yours truly.
Morgan Probity, WCCB Chief.
Hey, Chief, appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight. I had two questions for you. Have you had a chance to read Senator Jackson's write-up today that he published about his findings into the 4th Street incident? And has CMPD been able to determine if officers were firing from an elevated position that night?
Okay, to your first question, no, I haven't read that yet. There have been a lot of people weighing in. But secondly, I talked to counsel the first time, and at that point, I was not aware of anybody firing any pepper ball weapons from the 2nd floor. Now that has changed. I am aware that it has been, they were deployed in such a manner. However, it was not at people, it was at the wall to disperse the agent, which is how we train. So in and of itself, the deployment on the 2nd level is not in and of itself the issue that we're talking about. It is if you're on the 2nd level and deploying them and hitting people. So that's why the investigation is still unfolding. And I can't speak to all of the people who are going to be held accountable yet because we haven't been able to interview everybody who's involved, obviously, because it's an ongoing investigation. Dual investigation and review by the FBI. So there's a lot going on. We'll get to the bottom of it. It's just going to take some time because everything is fluid and there are a lot of people involved.
Brett Jensen, WDP Radio.
Yeah, Chief, again, I'm curious, have you spoken to Captain Koch about the last 2 nights or the 2 previous nights, how he just happened to be, either assaulted or attacked or whatever on 2 different nights, less than 24 hours? Have you talked to him personally about it, and what are his thoughts?
First, I've talked to him. I'm not going to speak for him. He'll speak for himself. I can tell you I'm disappointed in how he's been treated. This man, again, has put over 100 miles walking to facilitate protesters' First Amendment right. And he's rewarded with 2 consecutive assaults. So very disappointing. People should behave better than that. And I'm proud of him for the work he's doing. But even that incident where he was attacked the first time has been investigated to make sure all policies were adhered to as well. Just because you're doing good work, as I think he is, does not mean we're not going to hold you accountable if you aren't within all of our policies. There have been questions about whether or not he had the body on camera. So I've launched an investigation to get to the bottom of all that too. However, I'll tell you this, even the outcome of that, I'm still proud of it because he's doing what this country needs more of. He's putting himself in harm's way to protect the rights of citizens, some of whom, a couple of whom, a number of whom assaulted him because he was doing so. So I'm proud of him.
Joe Bruno, WSOC.
Chief Putney, do you feel CMPD has the support of Charlotte City Council?
That's really the decision that the citizens of Charlotte are going to make. I'm a professional. I don't care. I know these officers know how much I support them. There's an outpouring of support from the community, and council will have to reckon with the perception of citizens, not their chief of police. My job is to make the city safer. That's what I'm busy doing, and I got my hands full. I don't have time to worry about how I feel about what a council might be doing unless it makes us less safe, and I pray that that doesn't happen.
Brianna Harper.
That was an old raised flag. I'm good. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Brianna, you're going to have to say that again. You came in broken.
I'm sorry, man. We couldn't hear you.
Okay. Drew Balea from WCCB. Go ahead, Drew.
Back to you, Drew.
Actually, my question has been answered. Thank you.
All right.
Eric Spanberg.
Yeah, Chief, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier that there were no plans to purchase chemical agents in FY21 anyway. So do you view the council's action as essentially meaningless?
I do not. I think there was a clear message in their action, and that action has been heeded. That's why we started a review right after the incident on Tuesday, because nobody likes how that looks. And I want to make sure it's legal and within our policy. And if not, and if it's outside, and even if it's inside of our policy, I want to make sure we fix our policy. There's some things that we can improve, which is why I just told you about those enhancements, regardless of what the SBI and Office of Domestic Preparedness say. We can get better. We will get better.
Morgan Fogarty, CCB.
Chief, in the last question I asked you, we talked about that investigation that you just mentioned into the 4th Street incident and waiting until the results of that investigation come out before you determine who is held accountable. When we get to that point and we do have the results of the investigation and perhaps if they do indicate that there were missteps on CMPD's part, what does that accountability look like to you? And I'm not asking for a specific punishment for you to name right now, but does it include job termination? We've heard Braxton Winston say that he thinks somebody's job should be on the line for what happened within the 4th Street incident. Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with jumping to conclusions prior to the conclusion of investigation. Here's what I'll tell you. You'd be wise to stay tuned because we're making our headway in that investigation. We're unearthing things that we as we review all the body-worn camera and hear exactly what's being said, that we got to make sure is within the parameters of those policies. And I wish I had a crystal ball that maybe Mr. Winston has. I don't. All I know is I'm going to trust the investigation. And when I find fault, people who've violated policy, I'm going to hold them accountable. And if my global decision to allow for munitions is the wrong one, I'll be held accountable too. I have somebody to whom I report.
Brett Jensen, BT Radio.
Yeah, Chief, I'm curious. The head of the Charlotte chapter of the Fraternal Order of Police, we had a chance to talk to him this afternoon, and his direct quote was, "Morale is in the toilet." Do you sense that?
Maybe he's talking about me. I can't speak for everybody. I can tell you this though. Our officers need to feel they're supported. We're human. We're not perfect, but what they're sacrificing and the way in which they're sacrificing and what they're sacrificing for, the First Amendment rights of protesters, even when they're being assaulted in a lot of cases, I can't help but respect that. And they need to hear from this community that everybody else who's willing to say so respects and appreciates it as well. So morale is how it's perceived, and right now what they're perceiving that I'm hearing from them is there's a lack of support and a lack of appreciation for the sacrifice they're making. Now, a lot of people are reaching out, and we appreciate that. I thank you personally, but there are quite a few who are at least not vocally expressing it the way I think our people deserve to hear it. I think I'll leave it there.
Drew, WCCB. I'm not sure if your hand was still up from last go round or if you've got another question.
I do have another question, and it's kind of one that was sort of already asked, but I'm going to ask it sort of in a different way. Do you see any sort of correlation between the lack of violence within the protests over the last several days and your officers keeping more distance and being less visible to the protesters?
The connection that I see is when we don't have violence and destruction, we don't use chemical munitions or any force. That's the connection I see. We have to react to protect ourselves and our city. And when there's nothing to react to, we don't. That's as simple as I can make it.
Eric Spanberg.
Chief, I'm curious, you may have addressed this earlier, but I haven't heard you say it, which is take your police hat off for a moment and maybe share an opinion with us on how you as an African-American male feel about the mood of the country and the likelihood of progress this time after we've been through so many of these civil rights type disruptions.
Yes, sir. I guess we haven't talked enough because I've said this a lot. George Floyd should not be dead today. That was an aberration. It was atrocious. It was disgusting. It's you can't stomach the actions of that former officer who's now charged with murder and rightly so. It's disgusting. It hurts the profession, but I can never agree with anybody who paints us all with a broad brush. I can tell you, CMPD, we have some fantastic people who I can't think any more of. I love the way they do this job and the reason they do this job the way they do. So that incident is an aberration. It's sickening. It's disgusting. And he's charged with murder as he should be. But that's not the indication of everybody in this profession being as brutal and as inhumane as the way he treated Mr. Floyd. Those are not just my personal beliefs. Those are my professional beliefs. They are represented by everybody in this organization and most of the cops across the country.
Joe Bruno.
Chief Putney, some people are calling for you to resign. Are you committed to staying in your position through the RNC?
Listen, you want somebody to quit, you need to call another state, talk to another chief. I don't quit. So my commitment is my word to this city. I'm going to see it through, period.
Derek Dillinger.
Yeah, it's Derek with Fox 46 again. The question real quick in regards to, you mentioned threats to police officers. You mentioned these various incidents that are still under investigation. Is there anything that you guys are investigating in terms of any threats that have been made by the general public or incidents involving the general public towards the protesters that may have been of a violent nature?
From the general public towards the protesters?
Yes.
Yes, no. We are always on alert for that kind of thing. That is that, I appreciate you asking me that too, because that reminds me of what I wanted to tell you too about why we don't allow protesters to get on the interstate is because you've seen over the last week what cars can do to people, and it's intentional. So it harkens back to Charlottesville, and we've seen some recent incidents. So we take that pretty serious. We're going to even try to, save people from themselves. And so have we had any direct threats from the general public towards protesters? No, not that I'm aware of. But the reason we do what we do on the interstate is just that. Somebody could have ill intent in a car, and a collision with a human body is not something we want to see.
Got two more, Chief. Amanda Zoe with the Observer.
Hi, I think I cut out earlier. My question is, will officers in the civil emergency unit still be equipped with chemical munitions?
Yes. Are you saying based on the decision by the council? The answer is yes. We just cannot purchase them in FY21. And we've made enhancements about when they can be utilized. And I covered those as well when we first started talking to them.
All right, Morgan Fogarty, rounding it off.
Hey, Chief. Going back to the issues that Brad has run into over the past couple days, there was a clip of video that WFAE tweeted out that showed Brad surrounded by the protesters and making some hand gestures that seemed to possibly be taunting them or mocking them. Regardless of the positive work that he's done in the days leading up to what that video snippet captured, have you had a conversation with him about at least the optics of what that appeared to be?
Specifically, that's part of the investigation. We do have a policy against taunting and courtesy, so I can't really speak to him about that. His chain has made him aware of what the thing looks like, but I can't speak to him directly about a case that's being investigated. And I still say, don't want anybody out here taunting any protesters, but I still respect the work of anybody who's willing to walk over 100 miles to protect the First Amendment right of people and their right to exercise that right. So I still applaud him, even if I have to hold him accountable for a mistake he could have made, and that's to be determined by an investigation that violates the policy. I can do both. I have that capacity.
That pretty much rounds it off, Chief. Anything you want to leave the community with?
Listen, listen again. This is not my thing, talking to a screen. I'd rather talk to the people, but I appreciate you all being patient with us. I'll leave you with this. In spite of everything that we've been through, I'm proud of our officers. I hope more people in this community express to them directly how much they appreciate this work. We're not perfect. We're getting better, and today's an example of it. We're going to learn from our mistakes. We're going to get knocked down and get right back up because the safety of the city is that important to us. Thank you.